this is something that a lot of people are going to say I'm making a big deal out of nothing. All right, but stay with me here. All right, I'm gonna take us back to week one of the AP polls this year. Right, so the preseason poll before the college football season started for a lot of conferences across the country. They decided to include Pac-12 and Big Ten teams in that poll because nobody knew who really was playing. They were sort of getting a assessment of the overall state of college football, sort of in the general sense, right? So USC was ranked number 17. All right. Then it was announced officially that the Pac-12 would not play this fall, and that was when we thought at first that they wouldn't play until January at the very earliest. So they said, okay, we're going to take Pac-12 schools out of the rankings, right? Makes total sense. Okay. A couple weeks go by, college, the ACC, the SEC, the Big 12 start their schedules, right? They're playing football. They're having fun, right? USC gets left out of the first couple rankings again because they're not playing. Still makes sense, right?
Right.
Recently, right before week 5, the week 5 poll came out. The Pac-12 said we are coming back in November. All right. So Pac-12 teams, they were going to be back on the poll. Great. Makes sense. They're going to have plans to come back. They're going to be in the college football conversation, right? They're going to be in the college football playoff conversation, that is. So they said, okay, we're going to have Pac-12 schools back on there. USC, okay, which started off number 17, now was unranked. And if we're going by the number of votes that unranked teams got, USC was number 29. And I got some problems with this, okay? Sure. USC didn't play. They didn't make their case to be any better than where they started in the preseason poll, right? That makes total sense. But the fact that they dropped 12 spots without even having any games to prove themselves wrong, without even having any games to prove themselves that they weren't worthy of being number 17 overall, they then dropped 12 spots, and Oregon dropped just 5. Now, the two schools that started the preseason ranked 8 spots apart are now 15 apart, and USC is ranked behind BYU, Pittsburgh, and Louisiana Lafayette, the latter of which beat, perennial powerhouses, Georgia State and Georgia Southern, by a combined 5 points. Now, tell me if that makes any sense, right? The AP rankings are not about record. They're not about the standings. They're not about the schedule. They aren't about, what your record is. Obviously, winning games makes you look better than losing teams, but the AP rankings are supposed to be about who the best teams in college football are. And if you're going to put Pac-12 schools back on the AP poll, which makes sense because they're going to be coming back in a matter of weeks now, just around a month, a little more than a month, you cannot tell me that USC is not one of the 25 best schools in the country. Putting them at 29 is total disrespect. Now, why does this matter? I'll tell you why. If we get to the point where the Pac-12 schedule starts and USC has been dug a hole by the AP and they're ranked somewhere in the 29, 30, maybe even worse range, right? That's not great because now they have only a 7-game conference slate to make their case that they are a college football playoff worthy team. They could possibly go 7-0, and if they don't beat every team by like 50 points each, they will be at such a bad starting point that they can't even climb out of that hole, and that's through no fault of their own. That's through the mere fact that they were disrespected in week 5, that they were sent so low despite not having any games to prove that they weren't worthy of being one of the top 17, one of the top 20 or 25 teams in the country. And then they're going to have no shot, right? Maybe all of this doesn't matter. Maybe they come back to the point where the Pac-12 starts and they put them right back at number 17 where they belong, because I think 17 is a pretty fair assessment of where this USC football team compares to other teams across the nation, right? But maybe they don't, and that's where USC is going to get really screwed. So my case, look, it makes sense that they were out of the rankings the first couple of weeks, but once you get them back, they should be back where they were. They didn't have any games to prove that they shouldn't be there. They should have been back. It might hurt USC in the long run. That's my case.
You make a compelling one for sure, man. I want you to unpack one more thing for me, because you talked about the circumstances that happened with USC. You talked about why it matters. I want to ask you, why do you think it is that people felt compelled within AP to bump USC down so low?
People hate USC, man. I mean, people hate USC unless you go to USC, unless you went to USC, unless you play for USC. If you don't have some affiliate, I mean, we've seen this time and time again, right? The rankings just does not like USC that much. I'm not saying that they should have been a top 10 team the last couple of years, because they shouldn't have been. But historically, USC has been slightly disrespected. And I think that, the AP seems pretty clearly the favorite teams like Oregon, which only dropped 5 slots in the 5 weeks that it wasn't playing, when USC, who at school that has a bad reputation, people don't like them. They think they're spoiled children, cocky, whatever. They're scandal, whatever you want to call them. They've been called pretty much every name in the book. I don't know. Maybe it's they disrespect USC. Maybe it's they don't want to see them in the playoff. Maybe I'm overblowing this. If anybody has thoughts about any of that or any of what I've just said, please throw them in the chat. But at first glance, this just seems like a pretty sketchy and pretty disrespectful anti-USC bias.
No, man. I mean, you make, like I said, a very compelling case, and one that I think is important to acknowledge the fact that what happens at the end of the season is affected by the things that are happening right now. When you talk about the hole that they're going to have to climb themselves out of, unless teams are willing to, okay, look at them for one game and say, okay, let's at least put them back to where they were. If they're going to make process of jumping one team, two teams, maybe three teams at a time, that's going to be, you know, almost an impossible hole to dig yourself out of if you're talking about a college football playoff, which I think we both agree that those are the level of aspirations that this team can have given the talent that they have on the table.
Yeah, and that is the thing too. This wouldn't matter if this was a regular 12-game slate, because any team that pretty much goes 12-0 in a Power 5 conference, they're going to have plenty of time to make their case, right? But if you have 7 games to do that, and probably 3 or 4 of those games are going to be against teams that aren't going to look like very impressive wins. I'm talking to Arizona's. I'm talking to UCLA's. Maybe I'm talking the Colorado's. Maybe they got Oregon State from the north. Some. All right, I'll say it. UCLA counts. I'm just saying if they're in too big of a hole to start the season, I don't know if they're going to have the time to make that difference up.